At 6 o'clock in the morning, in the mountains of northeastern North Korea, a line of prisoners forms outside a barbed wire fence. The air is thin, the ground is frozen, the guards are already watching. One man in the line is named Shin Dong-hyuk. He is not here because of something he did. He was born here. Camp 14 is not a prison in the traditional sense. There are no release dates, no trials, no appeals. It exists for one purpose: permanent punishment. The people inside are told they are criminals by blood, that their families betrayed the state, that they deserve this life. Most prisoners do not know what lies beyond the fence. They do not know what a city looks like. They do not know what freedom feels like. Shin Dong-hyuk has lived his entire life inside this camp, and on this day, he will attempt something no one has ever done before. He will try to escape. Shin Dong-hyuk was born in Camp 14 in 1982. His crime was inherited. Years before his birth, a relative defected to South Korea. For that single act, 3 generations of his family were condemned. This is how North Korea's political prison system works. Guilt is not individual, it is genetic. From childhood, Shin was taught one rule above all others: survival comes from obedience. Children were encouraged to report their parents. Hunger was constant. Violence was routine. Shin did not grow up hearing stories about love or loyalty. He grew up learning how to avoid punishment. At school, prisoners were beaten for mistakes. At work, children labored alongside adults in factories and fields. Food was rationed so tightly that prisoners learned to eat rats, snakes, insects, anything that moved. Shin's world was small. Barbed wire, watchtowers, forced labor. Freedom was not a concept, it was a rumor. Camp 14 is one of North Korea's most secretive political prison camps. Satellite images suggest it covers dozens of square miles. Inside, prisoners are divided into labor zones: textile factories, agricultural farms, coal mines, firewood stations. Every movement is monitored. Guards are taught that prisoners are less than human. Children of guards are encouraged to throw stones at captives for entertainment. Punishment is public. Executions are staged as lessons. Shin witnessed his mother and brother executed when he was a teenager, not for escape, for allegedly plotting one. He did not cry. He had learned that emotion was dangerous. The underground prison, a concrete room without light or ventilation, was where prisoners were taken to be broken. Shin spent months there, suspended, starved, beaten. When he emerged, he was physically alive, but something else had changed. He began to imagine a world beyond the fence. In Camp 14, childhood is not a protected phase of life, it is preparation. By the age of 5, Shin was already assigned tasks: carrying water, collecting firewood, cleaning work areas. Mistakes were corrected immediately, not with explanation, but with pain. As he grew older, the labor intensified. Shin worked in agricultural fields, planting and harvesting crops that he would rarely eat himself. During winters, he was sent to coal collection zones, digging with frozen hands using blunt tools. In the textile factory, he spent long hours repairing machines and handling fabric meant for uniforms he would never wear. Workdays lasted 16 hours, 7 days a week. There were no days off, no holidays, no illness exemptions. Hunger was constant. Food rations were calculated not for health, but for survival at the bare minimum. Prisoners learned quickly that collapsing from exhaustion was not an excuse, it was a punishable offense. Accidents were common: a crushed hand, a broken leg, a body that simply stopped moving. When someone died, work continued. Shin learned to detach, not because he was cruel, but because caring too much was dangerous. Guards reinforced the idea that prisoners were replaceable, that their lives held no value beyond their labor output. Even children were told this until they believed it, and Shin did believe it. For most of his life, he did not consider himself imprisoned. This was simply the world, work, hunger, fear. Until one day someone told him that life outside the fence was different, and that knowledge made labor unbearable in a way it had never been before. In the camp's textile factory, Shin met another prisoner, Park. Park was different. He spoke about things Shin had never heard of. Cities with lights that stayed on all night, food that had flavor, music. Park had lived outside the camp. He had once been a martial arts instructor in Pyongyang. After losing his job, he illegally crossed into China with his family. When he returned to North Korea to avoid suspicion, he was arrested. His wife and child disappeared. Park never saw them again. But Park still remembered freedom, and he talked about it. Those conversations did something dangerous. They gave Shin a comparison, and comparison breeds dissatisfaction. For the first time, Shin understood that his life was not normal. It was engineered. Park spoke about escape, not as fantasy, as possibility. The firewood station was several miles from the main camp. It was less guarded, still deadly. Electric fences surrounded the perimeter. Snow helped capture footprints. Guard patrols passed in timed intervals. Shin observed quietly, counting steps, timing patrols, noticing flaws. The plan formed slowly. They would escape at dusk. Park believed the fence was electrified, but weak at a certain point. Shin noticed something else. In winter, prisoners sometimes wore extra clothes stolen from workshops. Insulation could mean survival. At lunchtime, Shin risked everything. He stole a spare uniform from another prisoner's sleeping area. Moments later, guards announced an inspection. Prisoners lined up. One man was beaten nearly to death for hiding food. When Shin was searched, the guard paused, then waved him back. Luck is rare in Camp 14, but it happened. That night, the plan moved forward. As darkness fell, Shin and Park moved toward the trees near the fence. They had 10 minutes. No signal, no guarantee. Park hesitated. Shin did not. Park ran first. When Park touched the fence, the electricity surged. His body convulsed. He did not move again. For a moment, Shin froze. Then he understood. Park's body had absorbed the charge. The wire sagged. Shin pressed himself against the fence, using Park's body as insulation. Electricity tore through him, but momentum carried him forward. He fell outside the camp. For the first time in his life, Shin Dong-hyuk was beyond the fence. There was no celebration, only pain. Shin's leg was burned severely. Searchlights would come soon. He ran. For weeks, Shin moved through the countryside. He hid during the day, traveled at night, stole food. He boarded illegal freight trains. He bribed guards. Eventually, he reached the Chinese border. An elderly man advised him to pretend to be a soldier. Shin wore a discarded military uniform and offered cigarettes. The guards waved him through. China was not safety. North Korean defectors were routinely captured and sent back. After months of hiding, Shin encountered a journalist. That meeting changed everything. He was taken to the South Korean embassy,
granted asylum. For the first time, Shin lived without guards.
In South Korea, Shin struggled. Freedom was overwhelming. He did not know how to choose food, how to trust people, how to live without fear. His story was published in Escape from Camp 14. He became one of the most prominent witnesses to North Korea's prison system, the only known person to escape Camp 14 alive. Today, Shin lives quietly, but his testimony remains.
Camp 14 still exists. Political prison camps still operate. Tens of thousands remain inside. Shin Dong-hyuk's story is not exceptional because he escaped. It is exceptional because he survived long enough to try. History often records leaders. It rarely records prisoners. But sometimes one voice escapes the fence, and when it does, the world has no excuse not to listen.